it's not doing well and doing good are separate. It's how do you do well and do good at the same time? And I think most leaders don't stop to think about what the impact of employee engagement really has on their organization. And when you have engaged employees, the difference in productivity.
This episode is brought to you by BackLooper. If you're tired of learning about guest complaints from online reviews, listen to this. It's time to protect your reputation while still getting valuable data so you can make enhancements to your guest experience. Using the most effective ways to generate responses, combined with intuitive reporting that quickly points out the largest issues, BackLooper enables you to strengthen your operations with superior guest experience intelligence that leads to higher satisfaction. Now more than ever, we need to bring our guests into the conversation so they can be a part of our industry's success. Get started today with no minimum commitment by visiting backlooper.com or email me directly at josh@backlooper.com. Welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and challenges facing the attractions industry today.
We chat with some of the top leaders in the field and provide resources that will help develop your career in this great industry.
I am Josh Liebman, founder of BackLooper. I help attractions collect guest feedback and identify top priorities needed for improvement.
And I'm Matt Heller, founder of Performance Optimist Consulting. I help leaders lead so they can increase employee engagement and retention.
Now sit upright, hold on tight, and get ready for the Attraction Pros podcast. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
It's going fantastically, Josh. How are you?
I'm doing really well. We have a very special episode of the Attraction Pros podcast today with a phenomenal guest.
I think it's the only time that you and I have teared up during this this podcast journey.
Well, we only started recording these on videos only about 7 months ago, so there's really no way to tell. I can't remember any specific time prior to this that it's definitely gotten a little misty here on the interview, but for all the right reasons. We have the opportunity to chat with Pam Landwirth today. She is the president and CEO of Give Kids the World, which is a phenomenal charitable organization and also a destination resort for families with children with life-threatening illnesses, as my AirPod falls out of my ear. And they have been serving, I think she said, over 176,000 wishes that they have had the opportunity to come true. And it is completely free for the families to come and stay for an entire week. And we're going to hear how the organization operates, how they do what they do, and also really about how organizations are able to connect their mission with a purpose for whether they're a for-profit or a nonprofit organization to help improve employee engagement, employee morale, and productivity, and just overall health of the business. This is going to be a fantastic, wide-ranging conversation.
And a lot of that really comes from her book called On Purpose, which she wrote basically because she found that employee engagement was one of those things that was keeping people up at night. And then she looked at what was happening at Give Kids the World and attaching what a person does every single day, whether it's, cleaning the grounds or cleaning a room or preparing food, and really tying that to a purpose larger than just doing the job or making money, right? There's a purpose for doing it. There's a mission, an internal personal mission that drives every single one of us. And when you can find out what that is and then be able to give your gift away, as she talks about, that's really when you find out what your purpose is, and you can be so much more fulfilled as a human being, but also much more engaged as an employee.
Yeah. And we're also really excited to point out that the way we were able to connect with Pam was through IAAPA, because we are the official podcast partner for the IAAPA Expo Virtual Education Conference that is happening the regular time that you would expect that IAAPA would be, in that third week of November, right before Thanksgiving, but doing it virtually. And Pam is, I want to say keynote speaker, but I think it's the game changer speaker for the IAAPA Expo. So we'll be able to hear about what they're doing with Give Kids the World, because of course they have had to close the property due to the pandemic, due to COVID. So we're also going to hear about what they're doing to be able to continue fundraising and continue to serve families in need during this time when they're not able to serve them in person and on site as well.
And equally game changing, you're speaking at IAAPA this year too, aren't you?
Yes, I am. And I believe you are too. My session, I am moderating a panel on 21 trends on sustainability, technology, and accessibility, which I'm really excited. I've been in talks with the other panelists and the other individuals who I'll be speaking with, and we're putting together some phenomenal content for that session. Matt, tell us, what are you going to be talking about?
Well, I'm super honored and lucky to have two sessions this year. So I'm doing a session by myself called Employee Development, Simplifying Customer Service, where we'll talk about, some of the real foundational elements of what it takes to create some, a feeling inside someone where they want to provide customer service, very similar to some of the things Pam's talking about today on the podcast. But I'm also, again, moderating the CEO Speaks session, which I'm super excited about. It'll be interesting to do that over Zoom because it's always been such a in-person organic session. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, I can't wait to tune into your session and to Pam's talk as well. And we'll include the registration link for the IAAPA Virtual Education Conference in the show notes. But for now, I'd say let's get to this phenomenal interview with Pam Landwirth.
Get your tissues ready. Pam Landwirth, President and CEO of Give Kids the World. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Attraction Pros podcast. How are you doing today, Pam?
Oh my gosh, it's my pleasure. I'm awesome. Thank you. This is so exciting for me.
It's exciting for us. So I'm sure that most people have heard of you and certainly heard of Give Kids the World. But for those of you who maybe haven't, can you give us a little bit of your background?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I went to school at University of Georgia, and like so many people decided, I was going to go off to law school and had a few months to kill. So what am I going to do with that time? And I said, I'll just come down and work at Disney for a few months and then head off. Well, yeah. After 16 years, you just come down, and it was the first job I ever had. I fell in love with it, and I just got to do so many incredible things with Disney. So, I started out in the hospitality side, really in the front desk of the townhouses and tree houses. My first job was actually as a server at Liberty Tree Tavern, then moved over and did the guest services. And then just when I thought, well, maybe I'll go back to law school, then they moved me over to casting. So I was an interviewer for a couple of years, and then went back into operations in Fort Wilderness, and then the Contemporary, and it was just so exciting. And then spent the bulk of the time in human resource development. So I was involved in all of the opening activities for all of the resorts at Disney. Got to spend, quite a few months over helping to open Euro Disney. So I was on the pre-opening team for now Disneyland Paris, of course. And so I spent over 16 wonderful years at Disney and just thought I would never, ever leave. It was just fabulous. Just love that whole industry. And then was introduced to Henry Landwirth, who was the founder of Give Kids the World. And I guess, as they say, the rest is history. The only thing that had taken me away from what I think is probably the best for-profit company in the world and go to the best nonprofit company, organization in the world. So love it. Absolutely love it. So that kind of in a nutshell. So I feel, and we're really very much the same. When you think about the theme park industry, the attractions industry, and then what we do is, the theme park industry, it's all about creating that perfect guest experience so the guests will keep coming back. And here at the Village, it's all about creating that perfect guest experience because our guests can't come back. But we're very closely aligned.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you just mentioned a little bit about Give Kids the World and the Village there. So can you talk to us a little bit about what some of those things are that you do? I know you're closed right now, but when you are open, what are some of those fantastic things that you do for the kids?
Yeah, so for those of you that don't know, we are a nonprofit resort that serves children and families from all around the world. We get them from all 50 states, 76 countries around the world. And these are children between the ages of 3 and 18 who have a critical illness and share one wish, and that's to come experience all the magic that Central Florida has to offer. Whether that be to meet Mickey Mouse or Elsa and Anna, swim with the dolphins, or the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. And believe it or not, 50% of all of the children diagnosed, when they're given an opportunity to express their dream or their wish, depending on the organization, is to come here. And I think that just says a whole lot about this industry, right? The joy that it creates and the excitement. So what we do is we provide the accommodations. They stay with us for a week, completely cost-free to the families. They get to go to all of the attractions here locally. Through the generosity of the parks, they donate all the tickets. And then here at the village, we just add on. So the parks send their characters here, so we don't have to wait in the long lines in the parks to take those, precious photos. Then every night we celebrate something different. So every Monday night year round, we celebrate Halloween. So we do face painting and provide costumes, and the kids go trick-or-treating. So we go through 9 tons of candy a year. I mean, amazing. Every Tuesday night, we celebrate everybody's birthday. And Mayor Clayton, who's our mascot, we celebrate his birthday with a surprise birthday party for him. On Wednesdays, we do a Village Idol program where the kids get up on stage and perform, and the other kids are judges. And then, of course, the difference is everybody's a winner here, and we, balloons and streamers come down, etc. Every Thursday's Christmas. So we make it snow on the Avenue of Angels. We have horse-drawn carriage rides. Santa comes and they all get gifts. Friday night is a Pirates and Princesses party. Saturday night, again, one of my favorites. They're all my favorite, but Saturday night we do what is in essence a prom, because so many of these kids miss out on so many opportunities, and prom is one of them, but it's Stellar Starry Night Ball. So we, it's like we have the mirrored ball and kids get dressed up. We have a spa here where the kids can go and get their makeup and hair done. Then on Sundays, we do the world's largest Candyland game. And we bring horses out for horseback riding. We have an ice cream palace that's open from 7:30 in the morning till 9:30 at night, so kids can have banana splits for breakfast. So that's just kind of like a glimpse into what we do for the families.
Yeah.
And again, everything we do for the wish child, we do for the siblings. So it truly is a family experience.
Everything that you just described there, and the fact that you capped it off by saying that's just a glimpse of what you do is, everything you described is, I would say, a year's worth of events that is packed into your daily operation, and doing that one week after the next. How do you accomplish and manage all of that, I would say, from a consistency standpoint in terms of the operations and making sure that these phenomenal opportunities are regularly occurring with minimal friction?
Yeah, it's amazing. So we're probably so we have, when we say we're a resort, we have 166 2-bedroom, 2-bath, wheelchair accessible completely. We have 4 wheelchair accessible rides. I didn't know if you knew that, but Zamperla has donated wheelchair accessible rides for us that they've altered so that kids of all abilities can ride them. But we're sort of like a family entertainment center on top of a resort that just caters to children with critical illnesses. And it is all because of the passion that our folks have. Now, when you think about that, again, this is pre-COVID, unfortunately, but we had only 204 full and part-time staff that were able to pull that off. Now imagine we get 8,000 guests a year coming through here. But the real backbone is we fill roughly 1,700 volunteer shifts a week. So when you talk about the complexities of putting that on, and then the added complexity but it's mostly volunteers who do it, and different volunteers and the training that goes into it. It's just a labor of love, and that's the only way I can describe it. But you have to have a passion for it. And I think it goes back to that, creating that perfect guest experience. And so why do you celebrate Halloween? Well, maybe these children won't be able to experience their next Halloween. There's no guarantees for them. They might not experience their next Christmas. They might not experience prom. So how do we take every one of those cool things, everything from life's simplest pleasures to the stuff dreams are made of, and pack it into a week? And so you can imagine operationally how difficult that is with volunteers and having to fill that number of volunteer shifts every week.
Yeah, Pam, I've actually volunteered at the Village a number of years ago, and I mean, all I was doing was, taking trays in the cafeteria and that kind of thing. But it filled me with such joy to be able to do that for these families.
Right.
That I can imagine what you're talking about with this labor of love. That now you're putting on a prom, now you're putting on Halloween for very, very special people.
Right.
And I know that this is kind of part of getting into your book as well with the purpose. So can you talk to us a little bit about, filling people with that purpose? I'm guessing a lot of people come with that purpose, but whether it's volunteers or your employees, having the purpose to serve the children and their families in that way, that has to be a big driver of their motivation.
Oh, absolutely. If you ask these volunteers, they're not getting anything out of it. And if you've been to the Village, it's not easy to get to. Here it's a drive, right?
Yeah.
And so basically but they'll tell you every single one of them, they get so much more out of it than they put into it. Just seeing a child's face light up that maybe have not had a reason to smile or laugh or even talk. And that's really what it is. And it's kind of funny. I mean, I collect quotes. I love quotes. And I think both of these are in the book. But two of my favorites are, one is Mark Twain when he said, the two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you discover why. And then Michelangelo, the purpose of life is to find your gifts. The meaning of life is to give them away. And I think that's just so important in everything that we do is once you find the reason that you were put here on earth, and it's to give back, right? I mean, it's to make the world a little bit better for someone else and just what you leave behind, your legacy. And I think so many of our volunteers, they're separated from their, a lot of them are, of course, snowbirds or folks that have moved down here. So they're separated from their families. And for this is their reason to get up every day. This is their reason to get up. Lou Holtz, who said, the four things you need, something, someone to love, something to believe in, something to do, and something to look forward to. Well, when you think about it here, wow, we have all four of those right here. It's, for our volunteers, this is the reason that they get up in the morning, because they want to come and give back. So it's kind of a jumbled answer, but I think it's that passion of finding your purpose and then being able to live it right here in this whimsical village is just amazing.
So Pam, you mentioned the book there, and I believe you also mentioned that quote from Lou Holtz in there too. Can you tell us the inspiration of what led you to write the book?
Right, sure. So, I've always wanted to write something. And for years I thought, well, let me write something about the 10 things I've learned from giving kids the world, right? I mean, I've been here 28 years now and every day I learn something new. But then I thought, okay, but the purpose is we want to share the message of the Village because we're probably one of the world's best kept secrets, even though we're consistently one of the highest rated charities in the world. Not many people know about us. So I thought, well, if I write something like that, who's going to read it? It's going to be the volunteers and staff and maybe some of our corporate partners. So I said, no, I've got to write a book that's going to resonate with hopefully corporate leaders. And so we're very blessed to have some very high profile members of our board of directors. And of course, with my background at Disney, I reached out to about 40 different people and said, hey, as a leader, what is the one thing that's keeping you up at night? And I thought I would probably get like 20, 25 different responses and kind of mull through them. And I got probably 3 different responses. And the first one was so prevalent, I can't even remember what the other 2 were, but it was employee engagement. And, I thought, wow, that's such a great topic. And listening to all the struggles that they have with engagement, I said, wow, that'd be really tough. And then I went and I looked internally at the Village and go, wait a minute, we've got 204 staff members here. And just because we're dealing with children with life-threatening illnesses, critical illnesses, there's still people who need to be engaged. And just because they're working for a nonprofit, let's face it, if you're a housekeeper, it might be cool thinking that you're doing it for a child with a critical illness, but you're still cleaning villas and working hard every day doing that, and then going home and nobody's there doing it for you. So it was like, oh, wow, I need to really think about employee engagement in our own village as well. and what are we doing, and looking at some of the things that we're doing well, and then benchmarking against some of these other companies and say, how do we do a better job of engaging our employees? So that was kind of the impetus behind it. And it was such a great learning experience, being able to tie, because I did want to make it about the village too, but tying some of those concepts to the village and making people understand that, yeah, you can do it at a small nonprofit with only 200, but you can do it at a large company just as easily. And
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I guess the bottom line is, as I say, the meaning of life is to find your gifts. The purpose is to give them away. How amazing would it be if an organization said, let me help you find your gifts, and then let me give you not only an internal way to use them, but externally to share them with the world. And I was so blessed by having my father, whose life was just committed to serving others his entire life. So it was since birth, this was ingrained in me. But then when I went to Disney, it was my very first job. I learned public speaking, I learned hospitality, it was like, that's where I learned my gifts. And then I came to this amazing place like the village and being able to give them away. But if companies thought along those same lines, how wonderful would it be? And then you wouldn't have a problem with employee engagement at all.
Exactly. And you'd have a much stronger tie between the purpose and what people do every single day. Right. So
Right.
I'm curious from your standpoint, because you work with a lot of different people and different organizations. What do you think is that roadblock of companies saying, let's help you find those gifts. Let's help you give them away. Oh, by the way, we have to make money. Right. So what do you think that roadblock is for people not being in that gift mindset?
I think what it is they see it as two separate things, right? And I see it as one. It's not doing well and doing good are separate. It's how do you do well and do good at the same time? And I think most leaders don't stop to think about what the impact of employee engagement really has on their organization. And when you have engaged employees, the difference in productivity. And so if they see that they are two are tied together, I think that's the biggest roadblock. I tell a story about in Hasbro, and they're an amazing company who have very engaged employees. But at this particular thing, they made this Candyland game for us, and it's a Give Kids a World Edition Candyland. And I got to be there when the very first game rolled off the assembly line. I mean, it was just like a kid in a candy store. And I got there a little early, and there were these women, mostly traditionally women, sitting on this conveyor belt, and the belt was going by them, and they were picking up one piece of the game and putting it into a box. And I would walk up to them and say, how long have you been here? 37 years, 40 years, 22 years. And I said, doing this same thing? And they said, yes. And I said, well, do you know what's different about this game? And they said, no. And so I started telling them about the village and the fact that this was going to be a gift, and it was all about the village. And you could just see them kind of sit up a little bit straighter. And there was just this pride that came over them, thinking that my putting this little piece in this box is going to bring joy to a child who may not be here much longer. And that connection is so critical. And I think you see that every step of the way is when you realize that that engaged employees are much more productive, mm-hmm. and they're much more loyal to your organization. And I think at Disney, one of the things that we used to teach in casting and other things is if you can get people to have pride in their organization, you can get them to do anything, right? And what great thing to have pride, because you believe in what your company means and what they stand for, and it's not just lip service. Mm-hmm. And I think in this day and age, so many people are coming out of college, and the millennials and things, they want to work for a company who not has the lip service to giving back, but actually does give back. And I think that's the difference.
Can you talk about, or can you walk us through the process of how an employee's connection to a mission or purpose translates to their daily job duties? Because you gave a couple of examples in the book as far as Davidson and with Walmart. And I'm curious as far as kind of what that bridge looks like between the company being connected with the purpose and with the mission, and then kind of how that trickles into an employee, whether they are, on that assembly line, kind of doing that, for decades,
Right.
or, or an
Mhm.
employee at Walmart, or an employee with any, large organization or small organization.
Right. I think it's getting to know your people and understanding what's important to them as well. And I think this goes back to providing choice. So there's so many companies like Support United Way, an incredible organization. Well, we're not part of United Way because we're not a local charity. We're an international charity, right? And so, but I think where some companies have really made that step is, yes, you can support United Way, but reach out to your people and find out what organizations support them. What organizations mean something to them. So if your life has been touched by the American Cancer Society or by Give Kids the World or one of those national organizations, but in my organization, I only have the opportunity to give to the United Way because it's all local, there's a disconnect there. So it's, why not offer more choice? And, we have a story, Matt, I think you were at Universal at one point. It was a great story where years and years ago, where it was, normal, it was just traditionally, they just, everybody just went through United Way. Well, they opened up workplace giving and allowed the opportunity to give to things like Gift for Teaching, and the donations more than doubled, because the employees thought, okay, now I can give to areas that have an impact on or where I give my time and things like that. So that's really one way they can do it. But it's just sitting down and learning your employees and understanding what makes them tick, and then making it part of your DNA. And I think that's what's really, when you read the part about, Davidson Hotel Company, and it really is part of their DNA. We're part of their orientation program. They bring us in, they talk to us, they send their folks down here to volunteer at the village so they can feel it and touch it. We have wish children, alumni children go to their areas and talk about it. So it has to be, real. And there's a story about the CEO I tell in the book, which is probably one of those most poignant stories when you think about it. And I introduce, it's how the book is really introduced, and how I introduce it normally when I talk about it is, here's this gentleman, he's the CEO of Davidson Hotel Company, a multi-million-dollar company with a footprint all the way from Hawaii to Florida, probably 60 plus properties, tens of thousands of employees. And here is a guy who I've known for 30 years. He's wonderful. He and his wife absolutely, I think they were the models for the Ken and Barbie doll. They're picture perfect. They're adorable. They're just handsome and beautiful, and three wonderful kids. And so we did an event down here where we kind of bring our corporate partners in and do like a summit and bring them all together. And we usually do it over a 2-day period. And then I have them volunteer on Thursday night. So it's a really hot night, and his job that night, John Belden, was to jump into a polar bear suit, right? We needed him in a polar bear suit. Now it's 96 degrees. We don't have the fancy internal workings where there's fans and stuff, but he jumped into this polar bear suit, just dripping with sweat. And this little girl saw the polar bear and immediately got attached to him, right? And just follow him around. Any other child tried to get near the polar bear, she would elbow him out. This was her polar bear. And then later that night, when we do tuck-ins for the families, usually it's our Mayor Clayton mascot that tucks the kids in. She asked her mom if the polar bear could tuck her in. And of course he said yes. Well, the next morning, I go around the room. Well, what did the experience mean to you? And John Belden stood up and he said, I've got a beautiful family. I'm very successful. Went on to all of the things that are going well in his life. And he said, but my life was incomplete until that experience last night. And you could have heard a pin drop in the room, but that he was articulating the power of purpose. That changed his life when he saw the smile, that simple gesture of stepping inside a polar bear costume. And so I just challenge people to step inside that polar bear costume and look at the difference that you can make in other people's lives, but then translate that and give your team and give your staff members the opportunity to do the same thing, to find their gifts, bring them to light, and put them to use. And just think about that. If you go to a place every day where you're feeling valued, where you feel like your managers know you and know what you do on the weekends, know where you spend your time, and then give you that opportunity to say, build your skills here so that you can go out and make a bigger difference in the community, it will reap dividends. It will absolutely reap dividends.
So I'm hoping that all of our watchers and listeners are shaking their heads saying, yes, this is exactly what we need to do. Yes, yes, yes. But we all know that sometimes the execution is a lot more difficult, right? We can say these wonderful things, and I'm 100% on board with you on the employee engagement. And in fact, I donated to a gift for teaching when I was at Universal. So it's funny you brought that one up. But I think the choice is so.
It was Henry Landwirth's son that founded that too. So it's all in the family.
Very good. Very good. Well, and getting kind of, I guess a little deeper, when you talk about purpose and you talk about, those daily things that will get into our DNA, what are some of those things that you might, give advice to a manager or a leader who's struggling with employee engagement? What do I do on a daily basis to help my team members see that I do care about them and I want to enact these things, but I just don't know what to do?
It's so funny because people say, you want your employees to feel valued. You want them to feel this way. But the difference is they need to be valued, right? And so people go through, what can I do? It's just it's the personal touch. It's all back to those personal moments that you spend to sit down with somebody and talk to them like they're the only person in the world. Give them the eye contact and listen. And most of us just, like I'm doing a lot of talking, right? And it's like you just want to talk, but you learn so much more if you just sit down and listen. We're all going through. Part of the hospitality industry is you got to leave your baggage in in your locker and put on the happy face and be out there and smile. There's probably not a time more in anybody's life that there's more baggage that people have right now and personal issues and those kinds of things. And we're all people. And I think it's just realizing it's the personal touch that matters. So every manager, you should sit down and with each employee, each staff member, and find out what's going on with them as a person and connect with them at that level. And once you build that bond and that trust, then the rest will just come. It really will. And that's the simplest thing to do is just sit down and ask open-ended questions and then just sit back and listen. And you'll learn so much. You absolutely will. And it sounds simple, right? But that's the beauty of it. It's not fancy things. It's not, you don't have to come out with these wild, okay, now it's the flavor of the month. And so this is going to be our buzzword this month. And we're going to do all these big parties and we're going to get our people engaged by showering with this and that. That's all window dressing. It's just sitting down and establishing those personal connections that will, I swear it will just lead to incredible things. It's like the cookies and conversations that I also share in the book. It's just sitting down and, twice a year I bake cookies and brownies and stuff. And I just sit down by department and I go in and I'll say, I'm providing the cookies. You provide the conversation. Tell me what's on your mind. How can we make this a better village, not only for you, but for our guests, for our volunteers? And then it's my opportunity to sit and share with them, what's happening. And then find out what are the barriers, because a lot of times we're creating barriers we don't even know. Mm-hmm. But it's all back to that personal connection, and it's not store-bought cookies. I sit there and I bake them and just showing them that you're a real person too, letting them, I think it's being vulnerable and letting them know that about your issues too, right? Just be human.
Yeah. And I was going to say that takes a lot of courage though, like for especially a younger leader who doesn't have the experience to know that, it's not the end of the world if someone, challenges you as a leader or tells you that you are the barrier. That takes a lot of courage to be able to admit that.
And my advice that I would give to every young person is take every job and say yes. You're going to work for good leaders, you're going to work for bad. You'll learn more from the bad leaders a lot of times than you're going to learn from the good ones, right? But just don't ever turn down an opportunity, because you never know. That was what at Disney, it was like, okay, I'll do this for a while. And then another door opened. Well, yes, I'll do that. Yeah, I'll do that. And then when you think about it, all of those things, the international experience, the public speaking, because I got to teach the Disney approach to people management, quality service. I, did opening activities. I worked in housekeeping. I worked in food and beverage, front desk. And now every single one of those prepared me for running this village. And so but you learn, and it's just never think you know it all. When you stop learning, you're dying. So it's just, as a manager, you do have to sometimes go, I don't know everything. I just don't. And that's why I surround myself with people who do.
Right. No, I think that's really good advice. And, I made a note here thinking of your time with Disney prior to Give Kids the World and really tying that into, I would say, current events. Just very recently, Disney announced they were laying off more than 28,000 cast members. And you were just giving some good career advice right there. And I was curious if you have, I don't know if it's advice or a message to those 28,000 individuals, well, they're from Disney or, Universal has been doing a lot of layoffs as well, or just, to anyone in the industry whose passion may have been truncated to some extent by this.
Well, I maybe you don't know this, but in a much smaller scale, but when you look at size, we had to lay off 84% of our staff in June, 173 people. Wow. And it was the hardest, and I'd been through downsizing, when I was at Disney and having to be the person on the other, saying, I'm sorry, you don't have a job anymore. This was heart-wrenching. I was saying goodbye to people, 30 years. And here it's not just a job, it's a family. People, like, they believe in this place. And, so it's easier to be a leader in good times than it is bad. But it's more important to be that leader in bad times. So that very first period, and I have to tell you, I moved into the village the day after we closed, and I stayed here because, we were all social distancing. It was just me and 2 security people around the clock. But we kept in touch with our staff. We kept them whole as long as we could. When we had to make that very difficult decision to lay them off, our whole focus right then was, how do we make this transition easier for them? We did classes where we helped them with their resumes. We reached out to other organizations, said, hey, do you have openings? Let us keep you connected. I would do a Friday update, just kind of keep their spirits up and trying to keep hope alive. And I think that's what's so important as we're having to say goodbye, and it's never easy. It's heart-wrenching. If it's ever easy for you to fire somebody, lay somebody off, or furlough somebody, you shouldn't be a leader because it's got to be heart-wrenching. It's got to hit you. But you have to make it personal with them too. And we tried to do that. We tried to really focus on that transition period and make them feel honored and special. And it was nothing they did wrong. It was a pandemic. And I think that's what's happening right now. 28,000, cast members and, the team members at Universal. It's heart-wrenching. It really is. But you have to do it with dignity, and then you have to show them that you care. I sent them, so one thing that we did, because we knew that our families, that, these kids who there's 700 wishes to the village each month being postponed. That's heart-wrenching, right? And so early on we're going, my gosh, these kids must be so depressed, and, they don't understand, they've got leukemia or a brain tumor or something, and the world didn't come to a stop because they have a brain tumor. Why is the world coming to it's complete stop because of a virus? And so we're going, so we thought, well, let's just send them back. Let's keep hope alive. Let's keep their spirits up. So we started sending out boxes of hope with just some games and puzzles and things. Hey, don't give up. Let's keep your spirits up. Your wish is just postponed. And then when we had to do the layoff for the staff, I sent them a box of hope at home too, with just some treats and games and stuff, and to say, you're always going to be part of the family. Just know that. And I think if we have the opportunity, and if in good faith you're doing everything you can possibly do to make that transition easier, they will appreciate it. I got more notes back out of the 173 people that were laid off. I only had 2 responses like, well, what's going to happen to me? What does this mean for me? The others were all, thank you for taking care of us. We know this was so hard on you to do. We know we had faith that you did everything that you could to save our jobs, but we knew this was a hard decision. Imagine that. I mean, that's such a testament to not only their belief, but it's because of those things that we've done all through the cookies and conversations and showing our staff that we cared for them. If you've read the Stephen Covey books, it's that emotional bank account, right? You just got to keep putting things into that emotional bank account over and over. And then when those tragic or hard times come, you can make those withdrawals. And hope that makes sense, but it's not something you can like all of a sudden try to be a good guy. It's something that you've built on because you've built up that emotional bank account.
Absolutely. That makes total sense. And I think part of the thing that, again, may be a roadblock for a leader is you may not see the dividends of those deposits right away. Right. Some of those you may not have seen in the outpouring until right now, but you have to keep making those deposits, year after year, because it's the long game. You always have to play the long game, I think, with engagement with your team members.
And when you see that they call us, we know we can't come back to work yet. We're not ready, but can we just come volunteer? That's when you know you've done something right. When they're willing to come back out, and now they want to come back out and volunteer in the job they had, and we go, well, we can't do that legally. Yeah. But if you want to come out and you used to work in entertainment, you want to come out and volunteer and helping with food and beverage or something. Yes, you can come back and do it in another. But they loved it so much, and they felt so engaged and so appreciated and valued that they would be willing to come back out and volunteer, which is amazing.
Yeah, I was going to move to the personalization component, sure. And we talked about it from the employee standpoint, and I'm curious, and it's shifting gears a little bit, but this mass personalization process that you do at Give Kids the World to be able to serve individual needs at scale, which I think is such an interesting concept that I think a lot of organizations would want to be able to do that, but there's got to be interwoven into the infrastructure, the ability to do these types of things. We were talking earlier how a couple of years ago we had the opportunity to chat with Stephen Amos, and he talked about a child that wanted to meet a unicorn, and
why not?
It was right. It was like the easiest thing in the world, and most organizations don't have that capability to be able to do so. You gave great examples in the book too, as the child who wanted to be a king for a day. And boom, and it was so because you've got the ability to have that type of personalization without it being a strain to your operations. And I'm wondering if you're able to share a little bit more about that.
Sure. You start with yes. You start with yes, right? We can do anything. And when you say it's harder for large organizations, sometimes it's not, but it's easy to say that it's harder. But we'll do 8,000 wishes a year, and our goal is to personalize each one of those, right? So it's just a matter of asking questions. We find out a child loves the color orange, and so we'll go in and paint the bedroom orange just for that week. We'll reach out and we'll find a unicorn. We will do whatever it takes. We have they love Star Wars. We'll make everything happen. We'll make that room Star Wars, because from our standpoint, right, it's because you don't know if that child is going to experience anything else after this. There's no guarantees for them. And so our whole mission is about, so just think about the happiest day in your life, whatever that was, whether you got married, you had a child, your team won the national championship, and don't you feel like you're on top of the world, right? Nothing's going to get you down because you're just like full of excitement. Well, imagine for a child 7 days of that. And then they go back and they go, well, I can conquer my illness. We want to renew their spirit. So that's what our tie is. We want to do those little things. And a lot of times it's not spending a lot of money. It's the little things I think where companies say we can't do this is because they get caught up in, it's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to do this. And it's the smallest thing, like painting a child's, room orange, or having their favorite meal, or having their favorite ice cream flavor. It's the little things that make the biggest difference. And one of my philosophies around here is everybody worries about the elephants, and it's the ants that'll kill you, right? You're going to see an elephant coming, but you don't see the ants. And it's the little things that chip away at your culture, or chip away at your relationships, or chip away at things, right? In relationships, people say, well, love died. Well, no, love doesn't die. You kill it. You stop doing those little things that you used to do. And you can say the same thing for staff members, right? And you're a new manager. You come in, you're all fired up, and you do all these great things, and then you get a little bit more seasoned, and you just kind of don't do those things anymore. Those are the ants that will kill an organization because you don't see them. but it'll erode the very foundation and the very core of who you are and what you do. And so I just encourage everybody, just pay attention to the ants. The elephants you can plan for and you can take care of those, but pay attention to the ants.
Yeah, it's funny, Pam. I can imagine your conversation about painting the room, at a I will say a regular hotel, a hotel that doesn't, cater to children like that. And the general managers are saying, "What? We're not going to paint the room for a couple of nights for a guest," but they're not seeing the long term, right? They're not seeing how special, how incredible that would feel if they got that information and were able to change something like that in the room. Now, granted, they may say,
"Would the family come back?"
Exactly.
Would the family come back if you did that? Absolutely.
Absolutely, they would.
Absolutely would.
But I think you're right. In a lot of cases, they're seeing the time, they're seeing the money, they're saying we don't have the manpower for that. So they're starting with no, where your attitude is to start with yes.
Start with yes. Absolutely start with yes. And I remember, just going back in time, and it's a lot of times in hotels and things, if you wanted to give a rebate or you wanted to give a refund or, you had a guest experience or something and you wanted to give them something, you had to go through all these different layers to get approval to do it. And there was always this, well, yeah, but those frontline people, they'd give away the farm, they'd give away too much money. And what we found was they gave away less because they would they would solve it at a different level. And that's what's so important is trust your front line. Yeah. Trust them to make the right decisions and set parameters, but just trust them. And a lot of times people, when they're irate and they feel like, and we hear it all the time, oh, my vacation was ruined because it rained, or my vacation, and if you just sit and a lot of times they just want to be heard and just be empathetic. And a lot of times when staff members are, upset, just listen to them. You don't have to have these big flashy gifts and stuff. Just listen to them and find out what's really going on and how you can make it better.
This reminds me of when I was in school studying hospitality, and in one of my lodging management classes, we were working closely with, I can't remember his name, but at the time he was the general manager of the Crown Plaza on International Drive.
Oh,
And he had this pin that he wore that said, it just said WIT. It was whatever it takes. And he said that was his motto. And when we asked him to explain kind of the backbone of that, where that came from, he said, the answer is yes. What's the question? And I've always loved that mindset, and looking at it. And it's not necessarily a massive organizational shift. It's just you're looking at it from a different lens. Matt gave the example of for most of the time, we use the painting the room as an example, starting with no, and now we're finding all the reasons why we shouldn't or why we can't do it, versus starting with yes is now you find so many more ways that you can do it, and why it's just as worthwhile, if not more worthwhile, to say yes than to say no.
And then to pass on the comments. And the thing is, it's so that worker who actually goes in and paints that room orange, make sure that if you get a good guest comment, you go back and share it with them so they can take pride. And that's where you get that engagement, right? It's like, why do I have to paint an orange, but show them the difference that it made in that child's life or that family's life or whatever. And then it's like, oh yeah, I really like that. Let's do something like that again. And one day it might be painting a room orange. One, it might be just doing what's their favorite cookie and having it in there. It's the little things that make the biggest difference.
And I think there's also probably the effect of the team member when you say, this is their favorite color. We're going to paint the room this particular color, and you're going to have a big part in that. So even proactively, you're setting the stage for the engagement as well. And then, you're completing the circle with the feedback at the end, if there was a great comment. But, I think there's a lot of pride that can be built there. It's very similar to the person on the assembly line, right? Just knowing why you're doing what you're doing, and it all gets back to purpose. It all gets back to, your employee engagement. But I think it also starts with that attitude of yes. And that's something that, I think is just so powerful, because as a leader, if you're saying yes, you're now inspiring your team members to say yes. If you're saying no, your team members are going to say no, and they're going to say, oh, why do I have to paint this thing? This is so dumb. Right. So it all starts with your attitude as a leader.
It really does. And if you get those folks who go, well, why, you're already doing all this for free, right? The families get to come free. They get to go to the parks free. When is enough enough? it's already free. And what I'll do, especially, like here at the village, is say, would you pay the price that these families are paying to be here? And I haven't found one person yet, when you really stop to think about it, the price they're paying by having a child with a critical illness, who would pay that price?
Right.
So we can't do enough for these families. We absolutely can't do enough for these families. And when you work in the hospitality or the theme park, people save for years to be able to have that experience. So shouldn't it be perfect if you want them to come back? And many of the times they can't come back. So you got to start with yes. But it's like you take care of the people, and the people will take care of the guests. And that's just, one thing that hopefully the hospitality embraces. And but to take care of them, it's so funny because you find we do so much data, right? About who our guests are and what makes them tick and what do they like. And you do all these surveys. And if you put that much effort into finding out the same thing about your team members, can you imagine how wonderful that would be? It would just be amazing that we spend so much time figuring out, okay, why did the guests come back and what do they like? Spend that time and do it on your staff. And then you probably won't have to do it on your guests because your staff will take care of those guests. But that's part and parcel of engaging them. It really is. If we just spent that much time getting to know our staff members as we do trying to find out what makes our guests tick, the payback would be amazing.
Yeah. So Pam, with the remaining time that we have left in the interview, I'm wondering if you're able to share with us one of the most inspiring stories that you like to share as far as a child or a family who has made a lasting impact or who has really moved you, that we'd be able to share with our audience as well.
Sure. And probably many in the audience have heard them, but we've served 176,000 families, and they all have a story. But I think the two that really, well, there's so many, but one is a little girl named Princess Alissa, who she was here back in 2001. And I don't get to meet every child. I mean, I'd love to say I've met every child that's been here, but she was stage 3 kidney cancer. She had a Wilms tumor and she was under hospice care. The doctor had finally said, if you're going to do a wish trip, you need to do it now. So her dream was to meet all the Disney princesses. Well, she hadn't been barely out of bed for weeks before this. Again, a precious little 3-year-old with translucent skin and bald little head. And she came down, and every day I would see her walking outside my office in a different princess dress, complete with a little tiara and the little acrylic slippers and the boa. And it was just amazing. Well, 2001, of course, was right after 9/11. And the Orlando Business Journal reached out and said, hey, we'd like to do an article about how the 9/11 is impacting charitable giving at the end of the year. Can we come out? Can we do a photo shoot? Absolutely. But I always have my photo taken with the child. And I said, I know the child. And that was her. So I got to meet this precious little girl who came from like being lifeless at the beginning of the week to like being full of life by the end of the week. I mean, it was miraculous. Well, she went back and told her doctor, if you want to make kids well, don't give them shots anymore. Send them to Give Kids the World. It's magic medicine. She graduated from college last year. And she started in the hospitality industry, and she will tell you the reason that she's alive today is because Give Kids the World gave her hope. I surprised her at her high school graduation. I was at her college graduation. And yes, she's spoken for us events. And some people, when they hear those, go, yeah, but is that really true? I mean, do they just say that when they get up on stage because they're representing? And I'll share a story. When I surprised her, she was in a small town from Wisconsin. And I wanted to go up and surprise her for her high school graduation, because we'd stayed close over the years. And my travel schedule's so crazy, I didn't know if I was going to make it. So I didn't tell anybody I was coming. So I drove, got to the airport, had to drive an hour to this tiny town, of course, had to go to the restroom. And I said, okay, I'll zip into the gymnasium, go to the bathroom, and then go down to the football field for graduation. Well, I walk into this sea of caps and gowns, right? And this young woman I'd never laid eyes on in my life came up and threw her arms around me and said, thank you for saving my best friend's life. That moment, it's real, right? I'd never met her. Obviously, she'd showed her pictures of me or something. It was that moment and just see this young woman blossom. And then on the other side, because you wish everybody had that story, right? But I think another story is a little girl from Canada who was 4, who was near the end of her life when she was down, and she went back and there really was no hope for her. So the family was very close to they were full of faith. And so they invited the minister over to sit down with this little girl. And so he sat down with her on the living room floor and said, do you ever think about heaven? And she said, oh, I've been there. And he said, well, it's where you go after, your illness, and when where the angels are. And she goes, oh, no, my family and I, we've been to heaven. And he said, your family and you've been to heaven? And she goes, oh, yeah, it's in Florida. And you want to know a secret? They let you have ice cream for breakfast. So imagine this family who did lose this little girl shortly thereafter. It doesn't take away the grief. But they weren't worried, because in her mind, she wasn't afraid of dying, because she was going to go back to give kids the world and have ice cream for breakfast every day. So those are just 2 out of 176 stories that they embody what the village is all about, but only because of caring people who make donations and those volunteers who are there serving the ice cream and showering unconditional love on these families. And the one message I like to share is, I firmly believe that what binds us together is infinitely stronger than what pulls us apart in any part of the world. And we're a microcosm. We have families from 76 countries, and nobody cares what color your skin is, who you voted for, who you believe in, what faith you are. It's just they care about, oh, your child has leukemia, my child has leukemia. Let's get together. What protocols work? Our volunteers all over the world speak all different languages, all different races, creeds. They come here because giving back to them is so important. Our staff is the same way. And if the rest of the world would just understand what binds us together is so much stronger than what pulls us apart, of course, the world would be a much better place.
Of course, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing those examples, Pam, and thank you for making Josh and I tear up for the first time on the Attraction Pros podcast. But I do want to, I guess, kind of follow that up with, you're going to be speaking as the game changer speaker at the virtual education conference for IAAPA this year. And can't wait to hear that presentation. But can you give us a little glimpse of what you'll be talking about during that session?
Right. I think it's going to be a lot about employee engagement, but it's going to be more like driven by, how do you do that in the face of the pandemic? How do you, again, another quote, Peter Drucker, the best way to predict the future is to create it. So how does a nonprofit who hasn't now served, families in 7 months, how do you find those glimmers of hope and those silver linings? And what we're thinking of, the one way that we're doing that is, a project that we're doing. So it was Stephen Amos's idea. He said, so many people, because we don't just let the general public come in and experience the village, right? Because it's a very private thing unless you're a volunteer. So what we're doing is Night of a Million Lights. And we are going to light up the village with millions of lights, probably 2 million lights, do the villas, the town hall. It's just going to be decorated, and we're going to invite people to come out and walk through it and pay. So it's going to be a fundraiser. So it's, how do you find those glimmers of hope? How do you create your future, predict the future by creating it? And how do you take something as horrific and as heart-wrenching as the pandemic, but make something good happen out of it? And we're finding those ways. And it's just serendipitous that we're going to invite people here. We're probably going to get new people to become engaged, new volunteers, hopefully new donors. And of course, all very social distancing, masks, taking temperatures. We're like the poster children here for taking care, because that's what we have to do all years because of the nature of the families that we serve. We've always been very careful about that. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about, a lot about the employee engagement, but how do you do that in times of plenty and in times like we're experiencing right now?
Awesome. I cannot wait to hear that and to hear the update of the Night of a Million Lights. And we wish you the most success with it. We'll include in the show notes the link to the conference registration for IAAPA.
Oh, great.
Everyone absolutely should attend. We'll also make sure we include a link to easily get to your donation page for Give Kids the World. And the book is On Purpose. Where can people find that?
You can find it on our website as well. So if you just go to www.givekidstheworld, and we have a store there where it's available on Amazon. And then also if you do givekidstheworld.org/lights, that'll tell you all about Night of a Million Lights.
Fantastic. Excellent. Well, Pam, thank you so much.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it.
Yeah, this was an absolute pleasure to have the opportunity to speak with you, and we really appreciate your time today. And for everyone out there who is listening and watching, just remember, we are all attraction pros. Hey, real quick, we know you expected to hear the outro at this part, but we have one more exciting thing to tell you about. Please share this podcast on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, tag Attraction Pros in it, and tell us something that you really enjoyed about this interview with Pam. And we will enter you into a drawing to win Pam's book, On Purpose.
Thanks for listening to the Attraction Pros podcast.
Make sure to subscribe so you can tune in when new episodes release. And even better, please leave us a review on iTunes.
For more information, visit attractionpros.com.